All right, well, good morning, everyone that's here in person and out there online. I'm excited about this event. A hybrid event about hybrid events. It's,
You get better than that.
yeah, it can get better than that. Sounds like a Seinfeld episode, actually. So we're pleased to have Benny Beckela here this morning, our Virtual United events. I've spoken to Benny many times about event planning, and he knows his stuff. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself rather than me do an awkward introduction. I want to thank the Chamber, as always, for their support of the nonprofit community and putting on these events so we can learn something. I know I learn something every month. So, Benny, all yours.
Awesome. And yes, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me, everybody. Jeff and Joe and everybody that's joining us. Good morning. I hope if I have a lot of energy for you, I hope it wakes you up a little bit, but I tend to get pretty pumped. So I think we're gonna have fun today. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. Well, I'll give the full little bio. So I started building technology actually while I was still in college. And I started building mobile apps when I first came out. And then during the pandemic, my team and we were actually organizing events it's like a community of entrepreneurs that's based where we're based in Madison, Wisconsin. And in the pandemic, and we were really trying to find ways that we could host really comfortable, casual, open conversations. And we were struggling to do that. And so we built our own platform called Virtual United. So that's the background that I have kind of coming into this, is that we really took a lot of time to understand how events worked, how gatherings worked, and build those, build certain features into our tool. As well as my role within the company as one of the founders, I get to work with all the clients that host things on our platform. So I've been a part of a lot of really different events, including several hybrid events. So I really love to kind of think about this stuff. I hope that kind of comes out, in the presentation that I have here, and kind of some of the stuff we do is that I think it's a lot of fun to think about and kind of think about like, what is the future of gathering, and of community kind of, and how does technology play into that? So that's kind of the setup for today. Is I want to kind of go over some, and I'll go through this on like the presentation a little bit too, but some kind of high level overview of hybrid events, a little bit of vocab, but just kind of something for people that might not be as familiar, but also kind of to set the stage a bit. Then I want to go over some just kind of key components that have details. So the technology, the software, a little bit of like the event format, and we'll kind of go through this. So I have a few intentional Q&A breaks, as well as an activity that I'll let be a surprise. But let me know with any questions. I definitely want this to be open, like easygoing, like especially with kind of a small group, which is awesome. We get to kind of get to know each other a little bit. And kind of get into detail on some things. So that being said, I'll kind of dive off, but please, feel free to speak up with any questions. Feel free to, interrupt in the chat. If there is a question and, we don't get to it, like I said, I do have some breaks for Q&A, so we'll make sure to come back to it. And yeah, we'll get rolling. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen here. All right. And I'm going to present. So speak up if you cannot see my screen. But okay, so the very first thing here. So this is actually a hybrid event that I helped host. And I wanted to just jump right out the gate here to kind of give a little bit of context into, what is a hybrid event? What does a hybrid event look like? We're here, right? Like, we're obviously in a hybrid event right now. And from a high level, it's when we've got in-person attendees and we've got virtual attendees. That's the most basic definition. But as we'll see in today, and as I'm sure you guys with your events and your organizations know, it's much more complicated than that. And there's a lot of planning that goes into place. And there's a lot of focus on really making sure that this experience is great for the virtual and the in-person attendees. But yeah, so just want to kind of show this picture. This is an event that we did. It was actually our first one. It was back in May. And it was cool. So I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but you can kind of get a sense. And I mean, even you just looking at the screen, like I said, everybody that's in person, we're currently in one. But getting a sense of, oh, there is some hardware involved, and you can kind of see the people that are in person, and you can see different conversations going on and things like that. Okay, so, and just kind of take one small step back to take a few steps forward. Virtual events. How many virtual events have people gone to before the pandemic? And I mostly mean that rhetorically. I think most of us went to, we've gone to more now. And I start with this to kind of say that I think virtual events are here to stay. And along with virtual comes hybrid events. But just to kind of set that up as a context is that it may have taken an event such as the pandemic, I know it did for myself, to build the behavior of virtual events and really getting value from them, and alongside hybrid, and it's here to stay. So these things are important, and they're very helpful to think about kind of in so many different aspects, and we're really going to focus on, on hybrid events today, but all together, just kind of remember that, because they're not going anywhere, and they'll be a tool that continues to give if you kind of think critically and really try to do your best. All right, so then, yeah, and I mentioned this before about how, our basic definition of hybrid events is in-person attendees and virtual attendees. The main core trade-off that we have is that they're highly accessible, and it lets you, I'll even mention a few more, but they're hard to pull off. And yeah, so I just kind of want, here, I'm just going to kind of set the stage a little bit before we kind of go in. What are some of these benefits? And they're unique to everybody. I hope we can kind of get into some specifics with each of our organizations in a bit. But compared to in-person events, if it's in-person only, you're able to have a global audience. You don't have the travel time and the expenses that you would have in an in-person event. It's very accessible for people that are not in the room. It also helps you can content repurpose, and you can record and do things like that. Compared to only virtual, if you had an only virtual event and you're saying, hey, but what if we added an in-person component? You're going to be able to have deeper connections. For the people that do want to come in person, it's going to be more enjoyable. You can also then still be able to leverage foods, drinks, and amenities in ways that you wouldn't be able to if it was only virtual. So it's definitely unique to your starting point. There are trade-offs. The biggest of which being that organizers have to plan for two pretty different experiences. And as and we'll kind of talk about what each of us do, but that's hard. That's hard to do, and you still have to do an announcement and promotion, as well as on the day of, you have to literally have somebody running both shows, right? I mean, I've got to trust that if the computer shut down right now and you guys lost the connection to me, somebody's in the room, to man the ship, right? So there has to kind of be two hosts going. There's also technology requirements, right? And these are some of the ones that I hope we can kind of open up. I'll share some of our experiences and some of the resources that we found, but there's technology requirements involved. You're going to need more to do a hybrid event than you would to do either in person or virtual. It's definitely more than both. It's not just one or the other. So, okay. So, and this is kind of the last thing we'll do before we kind of take a quick little break. But just to kind of understand the team roles, and this is mostly vocab for for this conversation kind of, and the needed resources. So within the team, there's the organizer that's coordinating everything, that's making sure everything happens, are arguably the most important person on the team. And maybe that's, and maybe these roles shift, and things like that. The host is the person that's running things. Jeff, that would be you today, right? Like, even though I'm kind of the presenter, you're the host. You're introducing us. And you've got the tech team. You've got the people Joe, everybody that helped set me up before this. And everybody that helped kind of get the cameras in place and things like that. Needed resources. You do need more of a budget usually. And every situation is different, but you'll need to have somebody that can help you handle the technology. And if you're doing a pretty big event, you might want to invest in some software too. So these are just more things to take in mind. You also are gonna need a physical location that actually has the capabilities for video setup. Not all places are created equal, and sometimes you don't have a good internet connection. You don't have a big enough TV to display. And I'll go more into some of the hardware that we've seen be successful. But you kind of need some of that. So that kind of sets us up a little bit for what where we're at. I did want to take a quick break. I'll just stop sharing my screen and just kind of say hello, learn a little bit more about you guys quick, and just say, first of all, what kind of roles within your guys' organizations do you have? And if you don't want to share, that's totally fine. But is anybody here maybe an event planner or an organizer, or Jeff, and I know I can't see super well, but I think we've got a group. Maybe if we could go around in a quick circle and people could just say their name and mention kind of their role with events if they have one.
Cool. So you guys don't have to speak up if you're in the back room, I guess. But can you hear me, Benny?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. So you guys can probably speak at regular volume.
Everyone mostly knows me. I'm Jeff. I do a lot of event planning and a lot of outdoor event planning, but running baseball and softball games. But obviously there's opportunities for us. We just had a meeting about live streaming a lot of our games. So this is something that's of interest to us as well. But I also do a lot of planning here for these events at the chamber, and definitely looking into doing some more of it.
Hey Benny, I'm Denise. I work for CBH Care, which is a nonprofit mental health agency. I am one of two that run in the development office, so we have two big events every year. We just had our first in-person golf outing, which profited almost double of what it was 2 years ago. And we do a culinary event in May for Mental Health Awareness Month at a big event venue here. So I think this is really good for me because I think we might do a virtual section of the event this year.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else like to share?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Kobe Scarrow. I'm actually with the Meadowlands Chamber, so I don't know what you know about it already. I work on the tourism department of it all, so I don't know the region, but we do have significant events that we do throughout the year. Some are public advocacy, others are for the tourism side of things. So we have that actually next week with our thought leaders. So it's all different kinds, from small business to bigger topics, between things going on in the area and then things going on in the community and with our members.
Awesome. No, that's cool. It's good to have that variety. I know how much work that takes too. So that's fantastic. And I'm thinking for time, maybe one other person to introduce themselves in person.
Did you say me, Jeff?
Yeah. I mean, you could probably use the rest of the 40 minutes to introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Benny, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. I've been involved with the Meadowlands Chamber for a number of years. And I guess like some of us, all of us that are here today, my approach was simply, if I had a chance to get out of the house or wherever we may come from, this is what I think a lot of us want to do, and I'm sure over time more and more will do it. But I actually come from the consulting side of nonprofit community. And so a number of clients that we have, a number of nonprofit clients, and as we know, they come in a variety of flavors. They are all going through what you're addressing here this morning. And I'll just leave you perhaps with one thought that maybe you can touch upon in the rest of the presentation. I left a meeting here last night at the chamber with our operating committee. And in several weeks, we have our once in a year gala. It is strictly going to be an in-person gala. And history shows that when we do this well, we have up to about 400 attendees. We're lucky, as our CEO had said last evening before we adjourned, he would be tickled to have half that amount in a couple of weeks. And so one of the challenges, and again, all these organizations are going forward, using the in-person solo as an example, how do you start planning for, is it 200, is it 300, is it 400? And quite frankly, Benny, I don't know what that answer, I'm not sure who knows what that answer might be, but I only bring it up because I think most of our nonprofit organizations, in any case, are faced with this. And, you know, having these conversations hopefully just makes some of this a little easier to digest and ultimately reach the levels of success that we all shoot for. But thanks again for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you. That's really informative. I'll make sure because we've got a few, I'll touch on some of that. And then we can hit in Q&As too. And I know for people that didn't get the chance to introduce themselves, sorry about that. I know we do have somebody in the crowd who's with the travel industry sales, which is cool, also has a nonprofit. So everybody here today, this is great. We got a lot of different experiences, a lot of different events. So thank you for bringing your experience too. So I will share my screen here and we will dive back in. All righty, there we go. So as I kind of mentioned before, so my agenda for today is kind of the high level, the software, the hardware, how to set up the room, and then kind of to go over some cool wow moments, as well as some of these kind of tension points and some of these like questions. Some things I won't really cover so much are some of the promotion and we'll come back to these if people want to hear about them. And there's definitely more things that I'm happy to talk about, beyond this call or, if we have extra time. But yeah, that's kind of my plan. So I'll kind of dive in first off on the high level organization and then kind of go into the software of it. Well, it looks like my animation's here, but the high level strategy is obviously really important. So when we're thinking about the end of the year gala or even the monthly meetings, if it's a monthly meeting where you want to have people be able to call in, there's a lot of components. I personally like to simplify it to like 3 core pillars, because I think that they're similar. I think they kind of like well represent where hybrid fits in as opposed to in-person or virtual. Because so the way I kind of like to think about this is we have an in-person experience. We have to obviously cater to that and do our best. There's also a virtual experience. So that's kind of the straightforward piece is you have your in-person and you have the virtual. And you make sense. We're like, oh, well, it's a hybrid event. We're trying to do our best to fit in the diagram between those and cater to both audiences. The third part, which is important to consider from the planning phase, is the video production and technology aspect, because you might not need this, certainly for an in-person experience, unless you are recording, and there's definitely value to doing video, or virtual. But it's kind of the third component where if you can kind of strongly say, hey, we've got somebody that is in charge of the in-person experience, someone who's in charge of the virtual experience, and then the video and technology, you're off to a pretty good start as far as at least like kind of saying, all right, like this is our bearings. This is where we'll start our jumping off point. another thing kind of as we think about, well, hey, what events should, can we host? What's kind of a good way to approach this? And I do want to get specific into some of the, like the gala situation and some of these other situations that we have with us. But some examples of formats that work really well are like presenters, kind of the situation where you have one person who is sharing their screen and walking through something. Similarly with courses, if you're teaching people, there are some formats that don't work well, or that you have to be pretty intentional about. And it's important to keep in mind. So I think, we won't dwell too much on some of these formats that, aren't super hot and ready for us nonprofit group. But just to keep in mind that, like, not every event will be as easy to host in a hybrid format as others. Generally, the ones that are easier are the ones where you have a clear and easy way to establish common ground. Hence why having a presenter is pretty easy, because a lot of the time is attention tuned towards one person. So you can establish common ground there. Another one would be the software. So similarly, I think we want to kind of spend a lot of time on some of the more detailed parts of this hybrid question, but you definitely need to get your software down. There's a few components that because later I'll kind of cover some specifics. Right now I'm still a little general, but it's a core pillar to make sure that you have, like, how it's going to run, and you can imagine you can plan out the event. For example, before this event, I sat down and I said, okay, the first 5 minutes I'm doing this, 5 minutes to 10 minutes I'm doing this, and you kind of got to do that with your software and make sure that your software is ready to go. So the last piece before we kind of take another quick break and then talk about the specifics is the hardware. So I can definitely provide a more comprehensive checklist for anybody that's curious. But you've kind of got to set up enough hardware to record, somebody that's speaking, and record a speaker, as well as to provide a way for ideally provide a way for the in-person audience to see the virtual audience. So kind of like what I've got in this picture, we can see that, up here, we've got a camera set up, we've got the presenters that are on screen, and we've got technology for that. Then you can also see the big TV where there's virtual attendees, interacting with the in-person attendees. And you can also see the workstation, right? That's where we had our host that was manning the station back there. So there's just a few, there's a lot of pieces to this hardware, and I don't want to, and we can definitely, if we have questions, go into detail about this. I would probably recommend you talk with a professional, or the person on your team who knows more than I do. But I could be happy to help out, because it's a lot of kind of small things. This is another example of what you can do to kind of have some hardware set up. So it's a TV that we had and you can actually see me if you look close enough on that TV. It's a TV that was in the room, and so in-person attendees could go over and they could wave at the camera and say hello, and interact that way. So just there's a lot of different ways to do it, but you need to be confident in your technology and think intentionally about it, instead of kind of assuming it'll work, or kind of pulling it together at the last minute. You definitely want to take the time to be practiced and to be rehearsed. So we'll take a quick break in a second here. And I know that we still got a little bit of the specifics and kind of thinking, hey, how do we address how many attendees are going to show up, and address some of these things. But does anybody have any questions as of right now that we could cover? Cool. Maybe any questions about like software, or questions about how to set things up? If not, we'll kind of, it's time for the fun activity I have planned, so I'm all ready. Okay, so this is actually kind of a cool one. So I'll share my screen again. So we're gonna play a game together. And what's cool about it is that all of us are going to be on the same page. So everybody's got a phone, I believe. If not, this actually does work on desktop all the same. But if you don't mind, and this, just take a minute or two, we're going to go to this URL, and I'll paste it here. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if the chat can go to everybody. But www.kahoot.it, and put in this game pin. Just take a quick second, but we're going to play a little game here together. So I'll wait as everybody does this. We'll be able to see people pop up. Do it on your cell phone. If you are virtual, you can do it on your computer. Corey, welcome. And yeah, right, because at hybrid events, everybody's going to have a cell phone. This is a way that we can establish some common ground together, kind of have some fun. Cool. We're clicking in. Give people a few more minutes to Kahoot in. Awesome. All right, cool. Give it another minute or two. And yeah, Kahoot, I like this product. Like I'll definitely, I'll share this spreadsheet, so you can see a link to it and everything too. Cool. All right. So that being said, we'll final second and we'll get started. Okay. So following along on your device, we're going to have kind of some fun little hybrid event trivia questions. All right. 3, 2, 1, countdown. So, and I think we kind of mentioned this, but I do want to hear from you guys. How many events roughly do you host? And you follow along, you kind of click the button on your phone or your computer that correlates with that one. Yep. But yeah, and define events however you'd like. We'll just get a sense of like how many events most of us are kind of hosting. All right, so all across, all over the board. And I think that's good, because events are something that every event is different. So that's just interesting to know. Now these times are going faster than I remembered. How many hybrid events have you guys hosted? And some of the, one of these is if you're planning a hybrid event. Yeah, let me know. Click the shape of how many hybrid events. I'm curious. All right, so cool. So that's good to know. I'm thankful that we have some people that are very familiar and that have done some of these, and this is good. We've got a lot of experience in the room again. Cool. All right, so one more question, and then we've got a fun one. And yeah, this one's a little subjective, but rate how you feel about hybrid events. If it's something you're kind of against, you see the benefits of it, maybe you do like it, but you're like, okay, or maybe you love them. You're like, this is the coolest thing since sliced bread. Cool. So I understand that. I actually think that kind of that probably see the benefit, but not a big fan, I think is where a lot of attendees are as well. So it's insightful to know that like, well, actually, it's also interesting that we all see the benefit, right? So we didn't have anybody that would rather do, just having none of that. But we can immediately see where there's kind of opportunity to kind of at least kind of catch your attendees and say, hey guys, I know you might not be a big fan of this, but this is why we're doing it, and this is how you can be involved, and kind of helping talk people from that blue category to the next one. Because I think some of that is kind of just engaging people and asking your attendees to say, hey, we know this is unusual, but this is going to be fun, and bear with us. So this is the fun one. It is Hispanic Heritage Month right now, actually. So I've got a question. We'll test your history. This point does have points involved. So I'll let you guys read the options. You can see my screen here. There are points. If anybody knows what Cesar Chavez accomplished in 1962 of these options. All right. Ask the buzzer. Let's see who won. Everybody knew. That is great. I could have dug a little bit deeper. I was hoping we would have a lot of people that knew the answer to that. So I'm glad. Sweet, wonderful. So that is the end of our game. Everybody was a winner. Yeah, I guess everybody did a good job of. Looks like they are choosing a winner. Because it was speed actually. So there is a winner. And it's whoever answered the question the fastest. Joe, there you go. Congratulations. Sweet. So hope that was a fun, just kind of little break. And I actually wanted it to be kind of a surprise. But I do have a few small suggestions for wow moments, kind of as I call them. Things people are like, that was new, have not done that before, and that was like fun. So one of those was that game that I just did, so anything that kind of establishes common ground. Another thing that was cool about that was that we get to kind of compete, right? So if you can get something where there's interaction between attendees, that's awesome. So this example is an example of what I kind of call like a portal. So it's kind of like an in-person display that kind of transports that in-person, to the virtual event. Kind of cool, right? If people see that in the room, they're going to be like, that's weird, and they're going to walk up to it and kind of wave at it. It's just kind of cool. Another one that I actually think is kind of important is platform training. And what I mean by that is for virtual guests, really give them the option to take a training to make sure they're comfortable with things and that they get the most value out of it. As you guys know, it's really important that everybody, has a good experience. And a lot of times that means kind of keeping an ear out for who might struggle, or who might not be, who you could do more to accommodate for, and to offer training. So, to say, hey, prior to the event this Friday, we've got several training sessions and you can jump in and it'll be a Zoom and we'll tell you how it's going to work and we'll make sure that you can connect and that everything works great for you. For some people who are questionable about hybrid events, this is really nice because they're like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. I don't understand what I'm doing, and it's a nice thing to do. So those are just a few quick suggestions of wow moments that kind of follow from my game interruption. Okay, but yeah, so now I'm going to kind of try to go through some specifics about some of the setup, the hardware, and then we'll kind of cover some of I think the big questions, kind of the elephants in the room of, some of the challenges and things to overcome. So one thing that I want to cover is the room setup. So certainly something that you want to think about, is kind of where are your cameras and where can people see things? So if we think we could think of like what the diagram would be for us right now. This diagram right here is for if we had like, each of the triangles is a camera and, we have speakers and obviously the people listening. That's a pretty basic one. This is another one that I kind of, imagined that is, was for like a gala, right? Or an event where there might be in-person kind of tables, and people hanging out there. But then there's also cameras on the speaker, and we're making sure that the speaker can connect. So I don't want to go, we could go in detail. I mostly want to use this as an example to say, be really intentional about how you're setting up your room. Like I kind of place this like corner camera angle so that there can be kind of a view of the in-person event. And then you might also want to have a camera or two that is mobile, right? That can kind of move around the event. If you have specifically like a gala, or a situation where people might feel like they're missing out on something. It might be fun to say, hey, I'm going to be there and I'm on my phone with you and hey, let's walk around together and we can go say hi to people, and kind of have like a mobile camera as well. Similarly with kind of the mobile camera, if you're trying to engage people and see people, you can also record, so it's very beneficial to kind of get like a highlight reel, right? So while your gala is going on, you can get a really good video and walk around. And that way, when people leave, you can say, hey, everyone, thank you for coming, watch this quick video with the highlights. It's just kind of sometimes a way to capture that celebration and that, those great moments and then share them with people that weren't able to make it. All right. So kind of my last little tips before we'll kind of go into just kind of some specifics and kind of dive deep is some pitfalls and then to remember the wow moments. But the pitfalls would be mindful of how in-person attendees are interacting with virtual attendees. I think everybody wants to kind of imagine that they can do this without there being an echo, and without there being a lag and without somebody having to say, I can't hear you, you're on mute. But the truth is sometimes those things happen. And if that happens during your event, sometimes that can be problematic, and it can just kind of cause a little bit of friction for people. So if you are having a situation where, kind of like even as I was doing, where I'm a virtual attendee and I was kind of asking the in-person people to reply, be really mindful of that. If we had a larger group of people, I probably would not have asked that, out of risk that that maybe that echo would have affected more people. But just be really mindful of that. And then the other big one is to always do a mic check. Always, always, always. When we're doing events that are virtual or hybrid, we'll have, we'll just tell we'll tell speakers, we'll tell anybody that's on the mic to come just, 15 or sometimes even 30 minutes early and just say, hey, you need to be here now. We'll have somebody sitting there with you. But always do a mic check, because things do happen and there's certain things you can't be in control of, but doing a mic check is one of the things you can be in control of. So I would advise you to kind of do a mic check there. So that's most of kind of what I had prepared. And I actually have like a few kind of fun, interesting things to kind of fill some time talking about either networking or about, hey, how do you repurpose content? How do you take the content from your hybrid event and use it on social media and use it in different places? That if we have time for, we'll kind of go into there. But I definitely want to be able to spend time to kind of go deep, and kind of think about some of these issues as well. So I know one thing that we kind of referred to that I want to shed some light on is kind of the COVID situation, right? To kind of talk bluntly about it. Right. So to kind of think about the situation that a lot of us are in, where there's an in-person event planned for Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year. And there's a lot of hope that it would be entirely in person. And now not only is, there's kind of the ethical, yes, like we should be doing things, offering virtual for people that cannot attend. But also, I think we're seeing a trend in the last month where people are choosing to attend virtually, where even kind of sometimes, even just a few months ago, COVID rates were lower. People were going out a little bit more. So what do you kind of do if you've got, if you've got a register, you've got last year's attendee list and you've got a certain amount of registrations, and now, it's a new ball game now, because you've got to plan a hybrid event, announce a hybrid event, and some of these things. So I kind of want to talk about that situation a little bit, and people please feel free to jump in. Cool. So actually, I just got a question about the pricing, and that is a great question. So actually, if people don't mind, we'll kind of start there with that question. So somebody in the crowd asked, and by the way, guys, if you do want me to mention your name, write your name in your answer to the question, or else I'll leave you anonymous. But yeah, so somebody in the audience asked, do you think ticket prices should be the same for those attending in person versus virtually? Great question. Truthfully, it does depend on your audience, but I think they should be the same. Here's my reasoning. So oftentimes people they tend to discount virtual events. And I tend to say, oh, well, it's on my computer, why would I pay for it? Hey, I don't even have to leave the house. Why would I pay for it? And my personal philosophy is that's not a good excuse. You're still here to give your attention. You're still here to donate, and to be a part of the community. And I think they should be the same. I will share though, that is kind of a bold statement. I think a lot of the times what I see in the real world, is either a discounted ticket, where they, really just, they'll be very truthful and say, hey, this ticket, because there's not a food cost involved, we're giving away this ticket for $20, which is kind of like I would recommend like $20. I think $20 is still like low enough that people are like, okay, I understand, but it's not like, it's not nothing. The other thing that I see a decent amount of is the completely free option, or even a suggested donation. So it's kind of how bold and courageous do you want to be? I personally would say go in for full price. And if you hear pushback of people saying this, then say, hey, we understand that people want to do this. We're going to offer a new ticket option for people that are just coming virtually. And then if people are still like, though, that $20 is pushing back, because you want to be accommodating, but you also want to raise money, then I would next go to a suggested donation, right? So we recently did this and it worked. We said, hey, we suggest a donation of $20. And out of, 85 people that registered, we only got like 5 people that donated, but, we got $200, because they donated even more than the suggested amount. So that's kind of my personal philosophy. I would even be curious if anybody else has any strong opinions about that, if anybody wanted to voice up, or if I didn't answer your question, if you want to kind of ask a follow-up on that, because I think the pricing is tricky with virtual events. Cool. And yeah, so put in the chat or speak up, anybody in person, if we do want to go to the ticket prices a little bit too. Sweet. Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I say be bold. Ask for it. You're definitely doing the work, and providing the value, and it's good. It's good. It's going to a good place. So then thinking, I think trying to take the COVID situation. So coming back to the COVID situation quickly. And I will come back to some platforms. So that's cool. So I'll come back to some software platforms. I'll come back to this in a second. We got another quick question about software platforms that I might recommend. So the biggest thing that I think a lot of, there's definitely a lot of challenging parts of having the event where you've got people registered in person, you've got people registered virtually. You're not sure how COVID rates are going to go in between now and when the event begins. And you're not sure how to accommodate the cost, and kind of prepare for a certain amount of people. The short answer is I'm not going to try to speak to some of the things that are really personal to every chamber, and they're different for every group. Because it is kind of different as far as, are people generally really good at, like, when they register, they actually attend, are people communicative? But some trends that I can say, kind of from looking at a few different ones is, generally with virtual, you want to send a lot more email reminders. Something about, like, if it's in person, people will put it on their own calendar and they'll kind of like know that they need to like leave on time. But it's been the trend with virtual, with the virtual attendees, that if you can send like 3 or 4 emails before, and then even on the day of, send like 2 or 3 emails, and just say, hey, you registered, it's starting right now. That's incredibly helpful and can really make the difference between having like 50% turnout and like 20%, or even like 10% turnout on the virtual attendees. So that's one tip that I feel strongly of. Another fun one is leveraging kind of social media as far as like getting engagement, like which is new with the hybrid events. But I guess that's not too speaking towards the challenges. But so that's my tip as far as attendees go. And as far as like accommodating the cost of, if you have an in-person, you're wondering, how much food should we get? How much catering should we get? We've got this list and it's going down. I think, I would just say you got to ask people and just really ask people to confirm, and kind of level with them and say, hey, like, we know this is a COVID situation and we want to really be here to protect your health and your safety. So please let us know if you're coming in person or not, because we want to accommodate, and we want you in person, but only if you feel comfortable, or however you want to address that. But I don't think there's one size that fits all for every organization. And I think it's a lot of kind of communicating over some of those barriers. So we do have the 2 other quick questions that we have in the chat right now. And then I'll kind of, but if anybody has any questions about kind of the COVID situation, I'd love to kind of hear those right now. Like maybe situations with how you guys are planning COVID, or any challenges around kind of revamping an event like that. So somebody in the chat asked, if in person, do you recommend asking for proof of vaccination? That's a good question. There's similarly the personal, every group is different. I do recommend asking. So I recommend asking and kind of indicating that, like, hey, we will have proof of vaccination at the door, or kind of setting the rule. But then being accommodating on the day of. that, you know, because that's my, like you, so that's kind of what we've done, you know, as we've said, all right, you know, we announce this way and we say, hey, these things are required and only come in these situations. And then when people are, and I should also say, we were also like really questionable, like looking around, like what are other organizations doing? You know, we attended some events ourselves. And we like the announcing that it's going to happen, you know, because people can still reach out if they're really, you know, against it. And they say, you know, they want to reach out to you and say, hey, I don't believe in vaccines, but I really want to come. I mean, you know, maybe you can make an exception. You can say, hey, are you willing to wear a mask the whole time? You know what I mean? Like, or just think of how you want to play that. But setting that rule so that people feel comfortable and they feel like, oh, I am vaccinated, but I can come, you know, and I can come to this. I think that's the best way to go. And then to be accommodating at the door, which is what I think some organizations don't do, you know, and you could definitely practice tough love if you want. I'm very safe myself. I believe in being very safe. But in practice, I've been very accommodating when people do show up to the door and they don't have that. Yeah, if that answers the kind of the vaccination question around COVID. Cool. So anything else on the COVID, and then we'll come to the platforms that we have and the cost of softwares and kind of how to measure cost there. Okay, cool. So there is the cost of software for virtual events. Short answer is there is a huge range. And I'll actually mention a few. Yeah, I will share my screen. Yeah, I'll share my screen to show it because I have a list of a few of them. But they range all the way from something like Zoom that is very low cost to something like Hopin, which is one of the most popular ones. I think it'll show me the website when I open this up, which is very popular, but very expensive. I think it can be as much as $1,000 for an event. And that was like the last time I checked. They've likely changed it by then. So that's a big range, $0 to $1,000. And a lot of it depends on kind of what experience you want to cultivate and what your number one priorities are. So then to kind of speak of some of the trends and how we've done this in practice. First, I would say that Zoom is actually highly effective. What is nice about Zoom is that both speakers and attendees feel familiar. You know, they feel like we know what we're doing and we're familiar with this. It is helpful, you know, in that situation to just say, hey, and you know, it's going to be more interesting, you know, is to kind of like make sure it's not like Zoom fatigue. So if you are going Zoom, you've got that benefit of, you know, like people are going to be familiar. They're going to be familiar to join. Their presenters are going to know how to present, you know, like for the most part. But then you also just want to make sure you're telling, and hey, you know, this is more, you know, don't be Zoom fatigued. We're going to have fun together. You know, like we're going to be having fun. We're going to be goofing off, you know, like, so if you do the Zoom route, that's great. I think there's a lot of advantages. I would recommend it personally for events that have either, you know, less than like 100 attendees, or if it's a situation where you don't need any networking, then Zoom is a great tool and I would recommend it. There's a few other, so then once you leave Zoom, then my question is kind of how important is networking versus like learning, you know, content delivery. If you're, you know, it's primarily the content delivery and primarily the hey, we really want to educate everybody. We want them to be, you know, it's kind of like you're taking courses, people are taking notes. Hopin and StreamYard are both very popular, and I would recommend them. So here, I will even, well, no, if you guys don't mind, I'll send through links afterwards. I'll put them in the resources slide of my document. But yeah, so Hopin is kind of an all-in-one tool, which will kind of enable you to do everything. It is expensive, but it enables you to do a really good job of having a bunch of different areas, giving sponsors some different abilities, and presenting content. StreamYard is more of the like streaming side. So if it's, you know, it's kind of along that same angle, and hence the name StreamYard, they make it really easy for you to go to YouTube Facebook Live, and anywhere else where you want to post a live link. And then they make it easy for you to kind of like, as a speaker, set that up and do some of, like kind of do the back end side of things. So both are highly effective for that. That being said, they don't do networking very well because they are very focused on that delivery, the content delivery. So networking is a big focus. You've still got a lot of options, unfortunately. But Remo is one, and maybe I'll share my screen and I'll show just a quick image of Remo. And so like Remo works where you get to move around this 3D world and then join breakout rooms. So it's like you'd walk around the 3D world. I mean, and I'm showing their website, you guys could check it out too. But Remo is a very popular one for if networking is really important and you're like, hey, really, like if you would describe your event and you'd say, hey, what's really more important than the event is the conversations that happen afterwards. Then I would say maybe you want to look at a platform like Remo because it enables attendees to form these small group conversations and kind of, you're going to get to be an avatar. It's kind of fun. And, it's, so I could definitely talk more about some of the, like there's definitely nuance with each of these platforms. And I'm trying to kind of walk a good line of detailed, but also high level, because I'd be happy to talk more about my specific experiences with some of these, but those are some of my favorites. And when considering what platform, those are the questions I would have in mind is like, what is, if we had to sacrifice one thing, what would it be? Would it be would we sacrifice the networking? Would we sacrifice the streaming to YouTube? And that might help you inform which platforms you want to use. And also to remember to use Zoom. Don't be afraid to use Zoom. It will take a little bit more of coordinating, or actually a tool like Ring Central, which is based off Zoom. But it will be very familiar with people. And as long as you have a organizer that's really active and is really saying, hey guys, we're going to play some games together and we're going to be active here on Zoom, people will light up and people will be well receptive of it and they'll understand that it's not your traditional Zoom meeting. So I don't know if that kind of answers that question. I will wait. So I don't know if I hit the cost on super specifically. So I will just touch on the cost again one more time. So I apologize about that. Between 0 and 1,000 is a really high range. I do think that, there are definitely platforms where you can find in kind of in the middle, that'll give you like $300 or $400, for that, like a large amount of attendees. But there's not a ton of space there. And I think generally if there is something that's low cost, Zoom is the winner kind of in that sphere, for a lot of good reasons. And so if you are thinking about the cost and that's where you're headed, if you have extra money to spend though, you will get value out of some of these more expensive platforms. And you probably want to have a team member to really make sure you capture that value, and you don't just pay for features that you don't use, but you can certainly do a lot with it. So I don't know if that kind of answers the cost question. Please feel free to kind of follow up on that, but that's kind of our outlook and kind of how we've addressed it. Cool. So does anybody have any other questions, or maybe something specific about an event that you're hosting, or a challenge you've had, or even just something kind of curious, something fun? I'll let the awkward silence go for a few more minutes if people are typing in a question. Give me one sec, and then I'll mention some networking tips. Okay. Okay. So someone asked, what would I recommend to do a raffle? That's a good question. I've used 2 different ones. I can't actually remember their name off the top of my head, so I feel bad. Certainly, and I know, because I'll keep you anonymous, but I will follow up with you and I can send you those links. I will share that the way that I found mine was through Google searching, and kind of then just trying it out myself, right? Like just saying, okay, well, let me get 2 computers up, right? And computer number 2 is going to be the other person, and kind of demoing them to myself. But I will find the ones that I've used and sent them over, because raffles are a fun way to kind of get people pumped at the virtual event, especially the one also has like a spinning wheel, it's like spinning wheels. So they're fun.
Hey, Benny.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can hear me still. Question about the similarity of experiences between virtual attendees and the in-person attendees. In your opinion, is it extremely important that you give virtual attendees the same experience as the in-person, or is that even possible, or is it not something you should even worry about?
Great question. I think they should not be the same. I think they should play towards the best experience you can deliver and that you think you have like the time and energy for. So for example, yeah, in person, you know, you've got kind of more of a reception, you know, more of a dinner, more of a presentation. You might have a much longer event. You know, it might be a full 3.5 hours. Perhaps your virtual experience is only an hour and a half or 2 hours. You know, it's only part of that. That's totally okay, right? Because there are just kind of differences to the experience. So I would say like to think about them as, hey, like, let's do our best to bridge the gap. But most importantly is like, don't leave someone behind. You know, don't like not think about it. You know, don't just focus on one of them and forget the other one, or else you might have people feeling left out. And you might have people like getting kind of Zoom fatigued and just clicking off. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but I would say kind of approach them each individually and acknowledge that it's totally okay to have differences, especially if it is kind of a matter of, hey, like maybe this event's longer or shorter, you know, or maybe it's more centered around this, or maybe there's a different activity. And while everybody else is networking, people here are, you know, doing something differently virtually. That'd be my suggestion. Cool. So I know, we got a question about a gala. So what to do during dinner? This is a great question. I think the short answer is to have fun with it, but don't be afraid to eliminate it. On one end of the spectrum, you could try your best to actually give your virtual attendees some kind of dinner. You could do it. You know, I mean, you could let me know. I think I know some people in, even in, you know, like the area, right? Like that could potentially help you guys out, where like they could send literally food in boxes to everybody's house and you could do a dinner. That's kind of one side of the spectrum. I think kind of in the middle of the spectrum would be saying, hey, maybe we do have a presenter. You know, we have someone who's going to come on, or maybe it's like some live music or something kind of fun that is specifically for the virtual attendees, kind of at the same time as dinner. Or just say, hey, the virtual part of this covers the presentation and, you know, covers the rest of it. And like, I think that's totally okay. That might be a good reason to kind of, right, make the tickets a different price. But as long as it's really quality. And in the interest of time, and I have time to kind of stay on, by the way, but just for everybody, there's another question about entertainment. Great question. There's definitely a lot of kind of, there's part of it that's like a similar answer to entertainment at an in-person event. What's different is that you are able to talk to talent that would be virtual, right? So there are people that specialize in Zoom, you know, playing their guitar over Zoom, you know, and things like that. So you definitely have more options when you're, you know, finding it to entertainment there. I would think the thing to avoid would likewise be kind of something that's not engaging, you know, or that's like an hour of something that's like a whole hour of unbroken music is a little tricky virtually. In person, it'd be pretty easy because you'd kind of like, you go to the bathroom, you get a drink, you kind of walk around, you'd listen to the music. But virtually, you'd probably be like 20 minutes in and you'd be like, okay, this is awesome, you know, but like, I want to go on a walk, you know, I'm sitting here for a little bit, you know, like, so I guess with entertainment, maybe the difference of what to avoid would be try to make it more engaging as possible. I think a lot of virtual entertainers really understand this. So hopefully you'll be in good hands if you found a professional that specialized in this. But yeah, it's just kind of considering that you have to go a little bit of an extra mile because you don't have them stuck in a room. So you've got to entertain them legitimately, you know, another way, if that kind of addresses entertainment. And so, yeah, since it is the top of the hour, like I said, I have time. And Jeff, I don't know if you guys wanted to wrap up in person, and we could keep going with questions, but I've really appreciated you guys joining me today.
I think as long as there's questions, we can continue to go. If people need to get something else, they can jump off. But if there's questions, we're happy to go. I mean, if we don't get a chance, we just want to say thanks again for the information, for the conversation. This has been great. Just to get people, I mean, obviously we're not going to answer every single question and set up an event in 1 hour, but just getting people talking about it and thinking about some of the issues is really great. Benny, did you want to tell a little bit about what you guys do at Virtual United? Like, what's your role if someone wanted to work with you, and how do you help people set up an event?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So we have a virtual event software that is designed to have multiple sessions going at the same time. So we chose the networking side of networking is really important, and having multiple sessions is really important. And so if there's a situation where someone's, you've got a conference where you want to have, like, and this can be hybrid, where there's one thing happening in person and there's one thing happening virtually. But where there's any situation where there's two things going on at once or more than one, our platform's kind of designed for that. And it lets you kind of, attendees choose which room to go into and kind of stay a little bit more engaged because they're being intentional. My role within that is I do the custom, like the people side of things. I'm one of the co-founders. So I do the customer success, as well as a lot of the training, and the onboarding. So like if people want to host an event with us, or honestly, I mean, if you have any questions, because I just like enjoy talking about this stuff. I enjoy brainstorming, I enjoy kind of sharing my stories so that hopefully people don't make the same mistakes. But so I'm there to kind of say, all right, like, how can we do this? And if it is a good match for us, we'll do it on our platform the whole way through. If it's not, I'll say, cool, I'll help you get set up and you should go to a different platform. I'm not afraid to say that. And then we really like, where we come into is we really like to try to help with the registrations with, hey, we've done this before. We'll help you draft 5 emails and, like all the reminders you need to really engage the people on the email list and get people to show up. But yeah, so those are just a few things of kind of what I do. And I know it's probably not the most clean elevator pitch, but really anybody that, if you have any more questions, if you're transitioning an event like that, if you want to get connected to anybody that is a virtual vendor or, some of these other platforms, like these are my people. I enjoy this stuff. So I'd be happy to help however I can. And definitely just kind of be a resource as far as like answering questions about when a virtual event comes up. If I can't answer it, I want to know the question because I want to answer it for myself, and I'll help connect you and just kind of be a resource there. Because we really enjoy the virtual events. It's definitely a challenge, and there's definitely a little bit of, and the hybrid, of course, but we're more on the virtual side of things. But that challenge of bridging that gap is one that I like to take on, because it can be done. And when it is, you get people talking about it and they're like, oh, wow, like that was the neatest thing, and I love that feeling. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day. Cool.
Right. So, are there any other questions out in the real world or in the cloud? Any questions here in the room? All right. Well, thanks, Benny. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you guys for coming.
We can share your email with the attendees so they can get in touch with you.
Please do. And I will drop the link to my slides right now, but I will also share these slides with you, Jeff. So if you want to share the slides with people, you totally can. But here, where's my chat? Oh, wait, because the link, I don't think the link goes to everybody, does it? So I'll have to share it with you, Jeff, and you can share it.
I have it from this morning, from the email this morning, so I can definitely share it along with your email address, and that way people can get in touch with you if they have any questions. But thanks again. Hope it's a great day out there in the Midwest for you. It's a little cloudy here today.
It's cloudy here too. So
all right, have a great day, everyone.
All right, cheers. See everybody. Thank you.